See, if you're watching the headlines out of the Middle East today and thinking, this is just another escalation, I need you to stop because this isn't just escalation, this is decapitation. The Associated Press is reporting that Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, is dead, with Iranian state media confirming his death early Sunday, today after a major attack on Iran launched by Israel and the United States. And I want you to understand what that means in plain English. This isn't a strike on a weapons depot. This isn't a hit on a radar station. This is the removal of the single most powerful node in the Iranian system, the one office that sits above the president, above parliament, above every ministry, above the Revolutionary Guard, above everyone. And once you do that, once you remove that person, you start a clock, because Iran's retaliation is no longer a question of if, it's a question of how, where, and how fast, and the most dangerous window is right now, the first hours and first couple of days after the confirmation. I'm Dylan Sterling, and in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you what's confirmed, what's noise, what the world is doing behind the scenes, and the 3 channels this can move through: military, economic, and diplomatic, plus the 7 signals that will tell you whether we're heading toward containment or a regional war that pulls in half the planet. So take a breath, because the retaliation window starts now. Let's lock the facts down first, because the internet is already flooded with fake screenshots and anonymous source nonsense. Here's what we have from high-quality reporting and official statements. AP reports Khamenei is dead, with Iranian state media confirming early Sunday, and AP notes Israeli officials had told the Associated Press on Saturday that he was killed in the major US-Israel attack. The UN Secretary-General has publicly condemned the massive US-Israeli strikes against Iran and also condemned Iran's subsequent attacks across multiple countries, calling for a way out and reminding the Security Council of the UN Charter's limits on the use of force. AP also reports global reactions. Britain, France, and Germany said they're prepared to work with the US and take necessary and proportionate defensive action to stop Iran's missile and drone launches at their source, while Russia and China condemned the killing of Khamenei and framed it as a violation of international law. And on the operational side, the US government's Maritime Administration has issued an alert warning of significant military activity in the Strait of Hormuz/Persian Gulf region, specifically flags potential retaliatory strikes by Iranian forces, urging vessels to keep clear if possible and to coordinate closely with US naval guidance. Now, with that foundation, let's talk about why this moment is structurally different from what you've seen before. For decades, the Middle East has lived through cycles: strike, retaliation, ceasefire, reset. It's horrible, but it's familiar. This is not familiar, because when the top leader is killed, the incentives change on every side. Iran has to prove it still has command and control, still has deterrence, still has reach. The US and Israel have to prove this wasn't a one-night headline, that they can sustain operations and defend forces and allies from blowback. And every regional actor in the blast radius, Gulf states, Iraq, Lebanon, Jordan, has to decide whether they're a battlefield, a bystander, or a broker. So here's how we're going to do this, Dylan Sterling style. I'm going to break this into 3 announcements, 3 major realities that just snapped into place, and for each one I'm going to give you receipts. Not vibes, not wish casting, receipts. And then we're going to rewind the last 72 hours because the lead-up tells you what the next 48 will look like. 3 days ago, the world still had a mental model that this could be managed through pressure and back channels. Diplomacy was strained, but it existed. Now look at what happens when you move from pressure to removal. The UN Secretary-General, speaking to the Security Council on February 28, 2026, condemned the massive US-Israeli strikes, and then condemned Iran's subsequent attacks violating the sovereignty of Bahrain, Iraq, Jordan, Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, meaning the retaliation lane was already active even before the full political shock of Khamenei's death settled in. And that's the key. People think retaliation is something that happens after a leader dies. But in a fast-moving war cycle, the retaliation mechanisms are already spinning, and leadership confirmation changes the intensity and the political permission structure. Now, with that rewind in place, here are the 3 announcements. Most countries have a head of state, a head of government, and a military chain. Iran has those, but it also has a lock, and that lock was Khamenei. AP's reporting describes him as the man who assembled theocratic power over decades, turned Iran into a regional powerhouse, confronted Israel and the US over the nuclear program, and crushed protests at home. Whatever you think of him politically, structurally he functioned as the final authority, especially in crisis. And when you remove the final authority, you create two dangers at the same time. Danger 1, fragmentation. Different power centers compete to prove legitimacy. Military, clerical, political. Danger 2, overcompensation. To show strength, someone decides the only safe move is a big move. And if you want to understand the retaliation window, you need to understand that Iran's decision-making could be pulled in both directions at once. Now here's Receipt #1. Receipt #1. The world's top diplomat, the UN Secretary General, did not speak like this was a contained situation. He framed it as a direct UN Charter crisis and highlighted that strikes and retaliatory strikes are crossing sovereign borders across the region. That is the language of systemic breakdown risk, not a one-off exchange. So if you're asking, why are people using words like regional war? This is why. Now we move to announcement #2, because the succession mechanism determines whether Iran retaliates like a state or retaliates like a wounded network. Here's what most people don't know about Iran. There is a constitutional mechanism for temporary leadership when a supreme leader is gone or incapacitated, and right now, that mechanism isn't just a legal process. It's a power contest happening under the sound of air defenses and missile alerts. Al Jazeera reports that under Article 111 of Iran's constitution, a temporary leadership council can assume the supreme leader's duties until a successor is chosen, and it identifies the current three-member interim leadership council as President Masoud Pezeshkian, Chief Justice Gholam Hossein Mohseni, and Ayatollah Alireza Arafi, a member of the Guardian Council. Now I want you to feel the tension in that structure, because if you're sitting inside Iran's system today, you're facing three simultaneous imperatives. Continuity, prove the state still functions. Deterrence, prove Iran can still impose costs. Legitimacy, prove you're the rightful steward of the revolution, and those imperatives do not always align. Sometimes deterrence pushes toward escalation, while continuity pushes toward caution. Sometimes legitimacy pushes toward the most dramatic possible retaliation, because dramatic retaliation is the easiest story to sell domestically. Now here's Receipt #2. Receipt #2. This isn't just theory. AP's reporting makes clear global governments are already reacting as if this could expand. Britain, France, and Germany are talking about defensive action to stop launch capabilities at their source, while Russia and China are condemning the killing and warning about international law and post-WW2 order. Those are the early movements of bloc alignment. 3. When blocs start speaking in those terms, it becomes harder, not easier, to climb down. Now we go to announcement #3, and this is where the danger becomes immediate for Americans, for Gulf residents, for shipping, and for anyone who touches the global economy. When people hear retaliation, they imagine one thing: missiles. But Iran has multiple lanes, and the retaliation window means the system chooses a mix. The lanes are direct strikes on Israel, strikes on US forces in the region, proxy activation, Iraq/Syria/Lebanon/Yemen, networks, maritime pressure in the Gulf and Strait of Hormuz, cyber operations, financial, energy, communications, diplomatic escalation, treaties suspended, inspectors restricted, alliances hardened. Now I'm not here to tell you which lane will dominate. I'm here to tell you what the world is doing, because these lanes are now live, and here's the cleanest operational receipt you can get. Receipt #3. The US Maritime Administration has issued an active alert, explicitly warning of military operations and potential retaliatory strikes by Iranian forces in the Strait of Hormuz/Persian Gulf region, recommending vessels keep clear if possible and maintain standoff and coordination measures. That's not a pundit's opinion. That's a US government operational warning to global shipping, and when shipping gets nervous, everything gets expensive. Now we're going to do what the competitor script does next: zoom inside decision rooms without pretending we're reading classified briefings. We'll do it honestly, by looking at what leaders are saying publicly, because public statements in a crisis are not just words, they're commitments. Start with the UN. The Secretary General didn't only condemn the strikes, he explicitly framed the principle: Article 2 of the UN Charter, then the fact pattern, then the way out, which is diplomatic language for, you are sliding into something you may not be able to control. Now look at Europe. AP reports Britain, France, and Germany declared readiness to coordinate with the US and potentially take defensive action to destroy Iran's missile and drone capability at their source. That line at their source matters, because once multiple Western states start talking like that, Iran can interpret it as coalition expansion, not defense. Then look at Russia and China. AP reports Russia and China criticized the killing and framed it as unacceptable incitement of regime change and a violation of international law, warning that strikes without Security Council authorization undermine the foundation for peace built after World War II. This is how regional wars become geopolitical tests, not because anyone announces World War III, but because everyone starts choosing which principles apply to which allies. Now bring it back to the central fear. Iran's retaliation window starts now, so let's make that actionable. I'm going to give you the 7 signals that will tell you which direction this goes in the next 48 hours. Signal 1. Does Iran choose a big symbolic strike or a persistent campaign? Symbolic strikes are designed to be seen and then stopped. Persistent campaigns are designed to wear down defenses and force political choices. Watch for frequency patterns, not single headlines. Signal 2. Do Gulf states become continuous battle space? The UN Secretary-General already referenced subsequent Iranian attacks violating the sovereignty of multiple regional states. If those states keep getting hit, or fear they will escalate their own defenses and potentially widen cooperation. Signal 3. Does maritime risk become real disruption? MARID is warning vessels to keep clear if possible and coordinate closely. If insurers raise war risk premiums, if rerouting spikes, if port operations slow, then this goes global fast. Signal 4. Does the Interim Leadership Council consolidate or fracture? Al Jazeera's description of the Interim Council is crucial. It's a bridge, not a destination. If factions contest the bridge, retaliation can become a legitimacy contest. Signal 5. Do European allies move from prepared to participating? AP reports they're ready to cooperate and potentially take defensive action. If that turns into active participation, Iran's target map can widen. Signal 6. Does Russia-China messaging harden into material support? Right now we have condemnation and principle framing. If it becomes material moves, diplomatic shielding, logistics, intelligence, the conflict becomes much harder to terminate. Signal 7. Do protests and diaspora flashpoints multiply? AP reports global protests, anger in some places, celebration in others, and mentions deadly clashes in Pakistan connected to protests around US facilities. That's the societal spillover risk. Even without state escalation, tensions ignite locally. Now let's do the part the competitor script does extremely well. Translate geopolitics into your life without turning it into cheap fear. If you have a 401k or any investments, you are not investing in Iran. You are investing in a global system that includes shipping, energy pricing, insurance, and risk sentiment. When a maritime advisory tells shipping to keep clear of key waters, markets start pricing duration risk. How long this stays dangerous? If you drive, heat your home, or buy groceries, you don't need the Strait of Hormuz to close for prices to move. You only need sustained uncertainty, because war premium gets priced forward. If you or your family are in the military, the UN Secretary-General explicitly referenced attacks crossing into multiple host countries. That means bases and assets are in the equation, and posture changes can happen fast. If you travel internationally, air routes, regional hub operations, and airline risk decisions can change quickly in conflicts like this, especially if missiles, drone activity remains active across the Gulf. Now we reach the ending structure your competitor uses. The binary fork, I'll do it too, but I'm going to do it responsibly. 2 dominant paths with messy middle possibilities, and 1 brutal truth. The longer this goes, the harder it becomes to stop. Path 1. Containment. The hard win. Iran retaliates but keeps it bounded enough to preserve an off-ramp. The Interim Council stabilizes the state long enough for succession steps. The US and Israel pause expansion and focus on defense posture. Shipping risk stays elevated but not broken. Diplomacy through the UN and back channels reopens. This path exists. It's boring, it's disciplined, It requires leaders to accept that not every ounce of rage gets expressed through explosives. Path 2. Expansion. The easy loss. Retaliation becomes persistent. Multi-lane, multi-theater. Gulf states get pulled further in. Allies begin talking at the source, then acting at the source. Maritime risk turns into real disruption. Great power alignment hardens, and the UN becomes a stage, not a break. That's how you get a wider war. Not one decision, but a chain of decisions that each feel unavoidable in the moment. Closing CTA, 1 hour 32 minutes and 0 seconds, 1 hour 36 minutes and 0 seconds. Let me leave you with what I know for certain. On Sunday, March 1st, 2026, the AP is reporting that Ali Khamenei is dead, with Iranian state media confirming. The UN is warning, this crosses sovereign borders and threatens international peace and security. And the US government is issuing maritime alerts about retaliation risk in one of the most important choke point regions on Earth. This isn't a headline, it's a hinge. I'm Dylan Sterling, and if you're not subscribed, subscribe, because the next 48 hours won't be about what people said on TV, it'll be about what moved in the air, at sea, and through financial systems while everyone was asleep. And I want your take in the comments, but do it intelligently. Do you think Iran's retaliation will focus on US forces, Israel, shipping, or cyber? And what signal would convince you the conflict is moving from containment to expansion? Don't look away.